They say a mother's love is unconditional, but they rarely tell you that a child's love is not. A child's love is often conditional, judgmental, and cruel. I love my mother, I suppose, but mostly, I was ashamed of her. I was Julian Vance, the prince of the piano, the man whose hands were insured for $5 million. And she was Martha, the woman who smelled of bleach and onions. The woman with hands like sandpaper. I spent my life trying to run away from those hands. I didn't know that those were the hands that held up my sky. My childhood did not smell like cookies or fresh linen. It smelled of industrial cleaner. Sharp, chemical lemon and ammonia. That was the scent of my mother. We lived in a basement apartment in Brooklyn, the kind where the windows were at street level, offering a permanent view of pedestrians' shoes. My father had died before I could memorize his face, leaving Martha, my mother, with nothing but debt and a colicky infant. She scrubbed. That was her verb. She scrubbed floors at the bank in the morning. She scrubbed dishes at the diner in the afternoon. She scrubbed offices at night. She was a machine of hygiene, erasing the messes of other people to feed her own mess, me. I was 10 years old when the music found me. It happened at the community center where my mother cleaned on Tuesdays. There was an old, out-of-tune upright piano in the hallway. While she mopped the linoleum, I sat at the keys. I didn't bang on them. I touched them. And suddenly, the gray world of our life burst into color. I could hear patterns. I could hear math. I could hear feelings I didn't have names for. A music teacher passing by heard me play a melody I had picked up from the radio. He stopped. He talked to my mother. He has perfect pitch, Mrs. Vance. He is a prodigy. My mother leaned on her mop, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist. Her hands were red, swollen from the hot water and harsh soap. Prodigy? She asked, testing the word. Does that mean he can get a job? It means he can be great, the teacher said. But lessons are expensive. My mother looked at me. I was staring at the piano keys with a hunger she must have recognized. I will find the money, she said. Her voice was flat, determined. Teach him. And so, the divide began. While I spent my afternoons learning Mozart and Chopin, inhabiting a world of beauty and elegance, my mother doubled her shifts. I began to notice the difference between us. My hands were becoming agile, protecting them like precious artifacts. Her hands were becoming claws, cracked, bleeding in the winter, stained with grease. When she picked me up from my lessons, I would walk 5 steps ahead of her. I didn't want the other students, the rich kids with their velvet coats and perfumed mothers, to see her. She wore a coat that was 2 sizes too big, bought from a charity shop. She walked with a limp because her feet were swollen from standing for 12 hours. Julian, she would call out, hurrying to catch up. Did you learn a new song today? Yes, I would mumble, not looking at her. Please, Mom, walk quietly. People are looking. She would stop. A flash of hurt would cross her eyes, quick as a shadow, but then she would smile, a tired, apologetic smile. Sorry, baby. I'll be quiet. One rainy afternoon, the divide became a canyon. I had been selected to play a solo at the district recital. It was a huge honor. Parents were invited. I will be there, my mother promised, her eyes shining. I will trade shifts with Mrs. Gable. I will wear my Sunday dress. The night of the recital came. The auditorium was filled with the scent of expensive cologne and flowers. I sat backstage, nervous, adjusting my bow tie. Then I saw her. She burst through the double doors at the back of the hall. She was late. She wasn't wearing her Sunday dress. She was wearing her work uniform, a gray tunic stained with something dark. Her hair was messy, escaping her hairnet. She was panting, wet from the rain. I'm here, she whispered loudly, waving at me from the back. The bus broke down, but I ran. I'm here, Julian. Heads turned. The elegant mothers in pearls whispered to each other. A few boys snickered. Is that the janitor? Someone asked. No, that's Vance's mom. Look at her. I burned. Shame, hot and toxic, flooded my veins. I wished the floor would open up and swallow me. I wished she hadn't come. I wished she wasn't my mother. I went on stage. I played Beethoven. I played with anger, striking the keys harder than necessary. The applause was thunderous. After the show, my mother rushed toward me, her arms open for a hug. She smelled of rain and that awful bleach. Julian, you were an angel, she cried, reaching for me. I stepped back. I dodged her embrace. Don't touch me, I hissed, my voice low so the others wouldn't hear. You smell. Why did you come like that? You embarrassed me. My mother froze. Her arms fell to her sides. She looked down at her stained uniform, then at her red, rough hands. She didn't yell. She didn't scold me for being ungrateful. She just shrank. She seemed to lose 3 inches of height in a second. I didn't want to miss it, she whispered. I'm sorry, Julian, I'll wait outside. She turned and walked away, her limp more pronounced than ever. I watched her go. I felt a twinge of guilt, but my relief was stronger. I turned back to my friends, to the world of beauty where I belonged. I didn't know then that I had just broken something that could never be fixed. I thought I was protecting my reputation. In reality, I was beginning to kill her. 8 years passed. The boy who played on a janitor's piano had grown into a young man with eyes only for the stage. I was 18, and I was hungry. Not for food. My mother ensured I never missed a meal, even if she had to skip hers. But for glory. The Juilliard School. That was the dream. It was the golden gate to the life I felt I deserved. But to open that gate, I needed a key. I needed to prepare an audition repertoire that demanded a level of nuance my battered upright piano simply couldn't provide. The keys stuck in humid weather. The pedals squeaked. It was a dying animal, and I was trying to make it sing opera. I need a grand, Mom, I said one evening over a dinner of canned soup. A Steinway. Or at least a Yamaha. I can't practice Rachmaninoff on this junk. My mother stopped eating. She looked at the old upright in the corner, the one she had bought for $50 from a church basement 5 years ago. She had polished it every Sunday until the wood shone. To her, it was a masterpiece. To me, it was firewood. A grand piano? She asked softly. How much is that, Julian? Used? Maybe $10,000. New? 40. The spoon shook in her hand. $10,000 was 3 years of her salary. It was an impossible number. It was a fantasy. I see, she whispered. I'll never get in. I pushed my bowl away, acting the part of the tortured artist. My touch is ruined on these heavy keys. I might as well be a carpenter. I went to my room and slammed the door. I didn't see her cry. I didn't see her look at her hands, which were already starting to twist with early arthritis, and make a calculation that no mother should have to make. 2 days later, I came home from school to an empty house. This was wrong. Martha Vance was never late. She was as reliable as the tides. Mom? Silence. I waited. 6 p.m. 8 p.m. Midnight. Panic began to set in. Had she been hurt? Had she been arrested? I called the diner. I called the bank. She didn't show up for her shift, the manager told me. If she's not here tomorrow, she's fired. For 3 days, she was gone. I sat by the window, watching the rain wash the grime off the sidewalk. I was terrified. Not because I loved her, though I told myself I did, but because I didn't know how to survive without her. Who would cook? Who would wash my shirts? Who would pay for the electricity? I was a prodigy, yes. But I was also a parasite. On the evening of the third day, the door opened. She walked in. She looked gray. Her skin was waxy, her eyes hollow, as if she hadn't slept in 72 hours. She was wearing her good coat, but it was wet and muddy at the hem. "Mom!" I jumped up. "Where were you?" "I was going to call the police." She didn't answer immediately. She walked to the kitchen table and sat down heavily. She placed a small, thick envelope on the plastic tablecloth. "I went to Atlantic City," she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "Atlantic City? You gambled?" I was shocked. My mother didn't even buy gum. I felt lucky. She lied. She didn't look at me. She looked at her hands, which were clasped tightly together on the table. "I took the bus. I played the slots. I won, Julian." She pushed the envelope toward me. I opened it. Inside was a stack of $100 bills. Thick. Heavy. It smelled of old paper and desperation. $12,000, she whispered. "It is enough for the piano?" My heart stopped. Then it exploded with joy. I didn't ask how she won. I didn't ask why she looked like she had just attended a funeral. I didn't notice that the ring finger on her left hand, the finger that had worn my father's simple gold band for 20 years, was bare. I only saw the Steinway. "Mom! You're amazing!" I shouted, hugging her. She flinched when I touched her. She felt cold. Rigid. "Go," she said softly. "Go find your piano, Julian." I ran to my room to find the classified ads. I didn't know that she hadn't gone to Atlantic City. She had gone to the city pawnbrokers. Not the nice ones. The ones in the back alleys who didn't ask questions. She didn't just sell her wedding ring. She sold a small, antique locket, the only thing she had left of her own mother. She sold her dignity, begging for loans she knew she would labor until death to repay. She had erased her past to buy my future. That night, I heard her weeping in her room. I put on my headphones and played Mozart. I drowned out her sorrow with my ambition. I got into Juilliard. The acceptance letter was the ticket out of the basement, out of Brooklyn, out of the smell of bleach. When I packed my bags, my mother stood in the doorway of my room. She looked smaller than I remembered. The gray in her hair had conquered the brown. "You will need a warm coat," she fussed, trying to hand me a scarf she had knitted. "New York winters are cold." "I have a coat, Mom," I brushed her aside. "And please, don't send me care packages with, your food." "The cafeteria is fine." I meant, don't send me things that smell like poverty. She lowered her hand. "Okay. Will you come home for Christmas?" "I'll be busy," I lied. "Rehearsals. Competitions. You know how it is." "Can I visit?" I froze. I imagined her walking into the pristine halls of Lincoln Center in her janitor uniform, her rough hands shaking as she tried to greet my professors. I imagined the looks on the faces of the girls I wanted to impress. "No," I said sharply. Then I softened it, cowardly. "I mean, it's very strict, Mom. No visitors allowed in the dorms." "I'll call you." She nodded. She knew I was lying. She accepted the lie because it was what I needed. "Okay. Work hard, Julian. Make them listen." I laughed. I didn't look back. Life at the conservatory was a whirlwind of silk and ivory. I was surrounded by beauty. I learned to drink wine. I learned to pronounce French words. I learned to hide my background. When people asked about my parents, I said my father was late, and my mother was retired. It sounded elegant. Back in Brooklyn, Martha Vance was not retired. She was accelerating. Tuition was covered by a scholarship, but living in Manhattan was expensive. Rent, books, suits for performances, it added up to thousands. So, my mother took a third job. She cleaned a bank from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. She worked at the diner from 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. And then, she took a night shift at an industrial laundry facility from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. The laundry was the worst. It involved handling harsh industrial chemicals, bleach strong enough to burn eyes, and lifting heavy, wet sacks of linen. She did this 6 days a week. She slept 3 hours a night. The chemicals began to eat her. First, it was the skin. Her hands turned red, then raw, then cracked. The skin peeled away, leaving angry sores that never had time to heal. Then, it was the joints. The cold water and the repetitive ringing triggered an aggressive form of osteoarthritis. Her knuckles swelled to the size of walnuts. Her fingers began to twist, curling inward like the roots of an old tree. She couldn't hold a pen anymore. That was why the letters stopped. In the beginning, she wrote me every week. Long, rambling letters about the neighbors, the cat, the weather. By my second year, the letters became short notes. Proud of you. Money in the account. Love, Mom. I thought she was just busy. Or lazy. I didn't know that every word she wrote caused her agonizing pain. I didn't know she had to tape the pen to her swollen hand just to sign her name. One afternoon, during my junior year, I was practicing a Chopin nocturne in a practice room. A friend, a wealthy girl named Claire, walked in. "Julian, there's a woman at the front desk asking for you," Claire laughed. "She looks like, well, she looks like a homeless person. She says she's your mother." My blood turned to ice. I ran to the lobby. There she was. She was wearing the same oversized coat. She was holding a plastic bag. She looked terrified of the marble floor, the security guards, the students in their designer clothes. But it was her hands that horrified me. She wasn't wearing gloves. Her hands were purple, swollen, and covered in scabs. They looked monstrous. "Mom?" I hissed, grabbing her arm and dragging her into a corner. "What are you doing here? I told you not to come." She stammered, shrinking away from my anger. "It's your birthday, Julian. I brought you, I made your favorite cake." She held up the plastic bag. Inside was a Tupperware container with a lopsided chocolate cake. "You took the train here? Looking like this?" I gestured to her hands. "Put your gloves on, for God's sake." "I can't," she whispered. "My fingers, they don't fit in the gloves anymore." I stared at her hands. I didn't feel pity. I felt revulsion. I felt the threat to my new, perfect life. "Go home," I said, my voice shaking. "Just go home, Mom. I have a rehearsal. I can't be seen with this." She looked at me. For a second, the light in her eyes flickered and died. She placed the plastic bag on a bench. "Happy birthday, my prince," she whispered. She turned and walked out the revolving doors. I grabbed the bag. I didn't eat the cake. I threw it in the trash can nearest to the elevators. I went back to the practice room. I played Chopin. I played it perfectly. My hands flew over the keys, white, smooth, and flawless. I didn't know that I was playing a requiem for my own soul. 5 years can change a landscape. In 5 years, a sapling can become a tree, a crack can become a canyon, and a lie can become a history. I was 25, and I was no longer Julian Vance from Brooklyn. I was Julian, the mononymous sensation of the classical world. I lived in Paris, in an apartment with high ceilings and a view of the Seine. My life was a series of first-class flights, velvet ropes, and standing ovations. I had managers, publicists, and stylists. They scrubbed the American poverty off me, They taught me to speak with a transatlantic accent. They crafted a bio that was vague about my origins, raised by a single mother who instilled a deep love of the arts. It sounded romantic. It sounded nothing like the truth. I sent money home. Of course I did. Every month, my business manager wired $2,000 to an account in Brooklyn. It was a lot of money, more than she had ever earned. To me, it was a tax write-off. To me, it was hush money. Stay there, the money said. Stay in the basement. Be comfortable, but be invisible. I never called. At first, I told myself it was the time difference. Then, I told myself I was too busy with the tour. Eventually, I stopped making excuses. I just didn't want to hear her voice. Her voice was the anchor that dragged me back to the smell of bleach. Back in Brooklyn, the money didn't fix what was broken. Martha Vance was dying by degrees. The arthritis in her hands had fused the joints. Her fingers were permanently curled into claws, unable to straighten, unable to hold a spoon, let alone a mop. She was fired from the bank first. Then the diner. Finally, the laundry service let her go. Liability, the manager had said, handing her a final paycheck. You're too slow, Martha, and that cough is scaring the other workers. The cough. It started as a tickle, a byproduct of inhaling industrial bleach fumes for 6 years in a windowless room. Now, it was a constant companion. Her lungs were scarred, stiffening like old leather. Every breath was a battle. But she didn't tell me. She didn't use the money I sent to see a specialist. She used it to buy my records. She used it to fix the roof of the basement apartment so Julian would have a nice place if he ever visited. She called me once. It was Christmas Eve. I was in Vienna, preparing for a gala. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered, annoyed. Hello? Julian? Her voice was thin, raspy, breaking over the static. Merry Christmas, baby. I froze. I looked around the dressing room, ensuring no one could hear. Mom? Why are you calling? I have a show in 10 minutes. I wanted to hear you, she wheezed. I saw you on the television. You looked like a prince. Are you eating enough? You looked thin. I'm fine, Mom. Look, I can't talk. I have to go. Wait, Julian, she paused. I heard a harsh, wet cough on the other end. I love you. I'm so proud, click. I hung up. I stared at the phone. I felt a flicker of something, guilt? Fear? But I shoved it down. I walked onto the stage. The applause washed over me, drowning out the sound of her cough. Silence became Martha's roommate. The basement apartment, once filled with the chaotic noise of a growing boy, was now a tomb. To save electricity, and perhaps to hide her deformities from herself, she kept the lights off. She moved through the shadows like a ghost in her own home. Her days were simple. She woke up. She drank tea, holding the cup with 2 hands because one wasn't strong enough. She sat by the radio. The radio was her lifeline. It was an old Bakelite model from the 70s. She had tuned it permanently to the classical station. She knew my schedule better than my manager. Tuesday, 8 p.m., Julian Vance plays Rachmaninoff in London. Friday, 7 p.m., Julian Vance plays Liszt in Berlin. When the announcer said my name, her face would light up. The pain in her joints would recede for a moment. She would shuffle to the radio. She would press her ear against the speaker mesh. And then, she would do something strange. She would place her gnarled, twisted hands on the wooden casing of the radio. She would close her eyes and feel the vibration of the music. In her mind, she wasn't touching a radio. She was touching the piano. She was feeling the reverberation of the strings as I struck them. It was the only way she could hold my hand. That's my boy, She would whisper to the empty room. Listen to him fly. When the music stopped, the silence returned, heavier than before. That was when she wrote the letters. She couldn't hold a pen properly. She had to wedge a thick marker between her two fists and move her entire arm to form the letters. The handwriting was jagged, childlike, massive. Dear Julian, the sun was nice today. Mrs. Gable asked about you. I said you are king of Europe. I am good. Hands hurt less. Lies. Her hands were on fire. Dear Julian, do you remember the song I hummed to you when you were sick? I heard it in the wind today. Please eat your vegetables. Dear Julian, I am tired. I think I will sleep a long time soon. Do not be sad. You are my sunshine. She wrote hundreds of them. Scraps of paper. Backs of envelopes. Napkins. But she never bought a stamp. She never walked to the mailbox. He is busy, she told herself. He is a great man. He doesn't need a letter from a washerwoman. It would only embarrass him. So she put them in a wooden box. An old cigar box she had found in the trash years ago. She kept it under her bed, along with her other secrets. The box filled up. It became a graveyard of unsaid words. One night in November, the coughing got worse. She sat on the edge of the bed, hacking into a handkerchief. When she pulled it away, it was soaked in bright red blood. She stared at it. She wasn't a doctor, but she knew what it meant. The bleach had finally won. Her lungs were turning to stone. She looked at the phone on the wall. She wanted to call me. She wanted to say, I'm scared. Please come home. Just once. Just for an hour. She stood up. She took a step toward the phone. Then she stopped. She looked at the framed photo of me on the dresser, a PR shot from a magazine, me in a tuxedo, looking aloof and perfect. No, she whispered. He has a tour. He has a life. I will not be the anchor that drags him down. She sat back down. She turned on the radio. They were playing my recording of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. She closed her eyes. She let the music fill the dark, cold room. She let the music hold her as she struggled to breathe. She died a little that night. Not physically, but spiritually. She accepted that she would never see my face again. She accepted that she was a stepping stone, meant to be walked on and left behind. And thousands of miles away, in a penthouse in Paris, I was drinking champagne, complaining that the bubbles were too flat, completely unaware that the woman who made me was drowning in her own blood. The prodigal son returned, not on a donkey, but in a private jet. I was back in New York, the city of my birth, the city of my shame, and now, the city of my coronation. I was booked to play Carnegie Hall. 2 sold-out nights. The posters were plastered all over Manhattan. Julian Vance, The Hands of God. My manager, a sharp-toothed man named Elias, sat across from me in the limo. The press loves the local boy makes good angle, Julian, Elias said, scrolling through his tablet. But they're asking about the family. They want the tearjerker. The struggling single mother who raised the genius. He looked at me over his glasses. We need her at the gala tonight. Just for a photo op. A hug, a smile, then we ship her back to Brooklyn. Can you manage that? I looked out the window at the skyline. I felt a knot of dread in my stomach. Fine, I said coldly. But send a stylist to her house first. And a car. I don't want her arriving in a bus. I sent the ticket. I sent a dress. A navy blue silk gown that cost more than she earned in a year. I sent a note. Be ready at 6:00. Don't be late. I didn't call. The concert was a triumph. I played with a ferocity that bordered on violence. The audience wept. They threw roses. I bowed, soaking in the adoration, feeling the high that only fame can provide. Then came the after party. It was held in a gilded ballroom, filled with donors, critics, and socialites holding crystal flutes of champagne. The air smelled of expensive perfume and money. Then, the doors opened, and there she was. The stylist had done her best, but you cannot hide a ruin with silk. The dress hung loosely on my mother's frame. She had withered away to almost nothing. Her face was painted with makeup that couldn't conceal the gray pallor of her skin. She walked with a cane, her steps shuffling and uncertain. But it was her hands, those cursed hands, that drew the eye. Even in velvet gloves, they looked misshapen, bulky, and wrong. "Julian," she whispered when she saw me. Her eyes lit up with a terrifying amount of love. She started to move toward me. A path cleared in the crowd. People watched, smiling the indulgent smiles of the wealthy watching a charity case. "Mother," I said, putting on my stage smile. I stepped forward, allowing her to hug me stiffly. She smelled of the car's leather and underneath that, the metallic tang of old blood. "You look fine," I lied. "I watched you," she wheezed, her breath rattling in her chest. "I sat in the box. You were divine, Julian. Your father would have been so proud." "Yes." "Well," I pulled away. "Let's get you a drink." I wanted to occupy her hands. I wanted to stop her from touching my tuxedo. I signaled a waiter. He brought a tray of vintage champagne, arranged in a precarious pyramid. "Here," I handed her a flute. "Oh, I don't drink," she stammered. "Just hold it," I hissed through my teeth. "For the photo." She reached out. Her arthritis had fused her fingers into a permanent, trembling claw. She tried to grip the delicate stem of the glass. I can't," she whispered. "Just take it." I snapped. She tried. She really tried. She clamped her gloved hands around the glass. But a spasm of pain, or perhaps a tremor of weakness, shot through her arm. The glass slipped. It didn't just fall. It hit the tray. Crash. The pyramid collapsed. 20 glasses shattered. Champagne exploded outward, soaking the tablecloth, splashing onto the evening gowns of the women nearby, and drenching my polished shoes. The room went silent. The music stopped. Every eye in the ballroom turned to us. My mother stood there, her hand still outstretched, shaking violently. She looked at the broken glass, then at me, her eyes wide with horror. "I'm sorry," she gasped, dropping to her knees to try and pick up the shards. "I'm so sorry, I'll clean it. I have a rag. Do you have a rag?" She was reverting to the maid. She was on her knees in her expensive dress, trying to scrub the floor of Carnegie Hall. Something inside me snapped. The dam of shame I had built for 15 years burst. I didn't see a sick old woman. I saw the stain on my life. I saw the bleach. I saw the poverty trying to drag me back down. "Stop it!" I roared. The sound echoed off the high ceilings. My mother froze. "Stand up!" I yelled, my face twisting with rage. "You are embarrassing me. You always embarrass me." "Julian," she whimpered, looking up. "Look at you." I gestured at her, cruel and unhinged. "You don't belong here. You never belonged here. I gave you a dress, I gave you a car, and you still act like a janitor." I leaned down, my voice a venomous whisper that carried across the silent room. "Why did you come? Did you come to ruin my night? You are nothing but a weight around my neck. You are a stain on my life, Martha. I wish you had never come." My mother looked at me. For the first time in my life, she didn't look afraid. She didn't look apologetic. She looked broken. Not like a bone breaks, but like a light bulb breaks. The filament inside her finally burned out. The light in her eyes vanished. She slowly pulled herself up using the table. She didn't look at the crowd. She looked only at me. She reached out a trembling hand, as if to touch my face, then pulled it back. "I'm sorry, Julian," she whispered. Her voice was steady, eerie. "I didn't mean to be a stain. I just wanted to see you shine." She took a breath that rattled like dry leaves. "I will go now. I won't bother you again." She turned. The crowd parted for her, not out of respect, but out of discomfort. She walked to the door. She didn't look back. The heavy double door swallowed her small, frail figure. I stood there, breathing hard. "It's fine," I announced to the room, fixing my tie. "Just an accident." Let the music play. The band started up again. The chatter resumed. But the champagne tasted like vinegar, and the applause felt like static. I woke up the next morning with a headache that felt like a nail being driven into my temple. The sun was streaming into my hotel suite, bright and accusing. I rolled over and checked my phone. 11 a.m. There were 12 missed calls, all from a number I didn't recognize. A generic Brooklyn area code. I sat up. A cold feeling, colder than the air conditioning, settled in my gut. I remembered the night before. I remembered her face. I should call her, I thought. I'll send her flowers. I'll apologize. I was just stressed. I pressed the button to return the call. It rang once. "Hello?" A woman's voice. Official. Tired. "This is Julian Vance," I said. "You called me?" "Mr. Vance," the woman said. "This is Detective Miller from the 78th Precinct. We found your number next to the phone." "Precinct?" I stood up. "Is my mother okay? Was she arrested? God, did she get drunk? Did she cause a scene? Mr. Vance, I'm sorry to tell you this. Your mother passed away last night." The world stopped spinning. The sounds of the city outside, the horns, the sirens, vanished. "What?" "Her neighbor found her this morning. It appears she died in her sleep. Natural causes, though the coroner noted significant respiratory failure. It looks like it was peaceful." "Peaceful?" "She died alone in a basement after her son told her she was a stain on his life." I couldn't speak. "We need you to come identify the body, sir, and handle the arrangements." The drive to Brooklyn was a blur. I sat in the back of the taxi, staring at my hands. My $5 million hands. They felt useless. They felt like butcher's hands. I went to the apartment first. I wasn't ready for the morgue. I needed to see where she had lived. I hadn't been back in 10 years. I walked down the concrete steps. The railing was rusted. The door was unlocked. The police had left it that way. I pushed it open. The smell hit me instantly. It wasn't bleach anymore. It was mold, damp earth, and something else. The metallic, coppery smell of sickness. I flipped the light switch. Nothing happened. The electricity had been cut off. I used my phone flashlight. The beam cut through the dark. The apartment was empty. Not just devoid of people, devoid of things. The furniture was gone. The TV was gone. The rugs were gone. There was only a single mattress on the floor in the corner, covered by thin blankets. A small camping stove. And the old radio. "Where was everything?" I whispered. I walked to the kitchen. The cupboards were bare. A single box of tea bags. A half-empty jar of peanut butter. She had sold everything. Why? I sent her $2,000 a month. Where did the money go? I walked to the mattress. On the floor next to it was a pile of medical bills. I picked them up. Oncology. Pulmonology. Chemotherapy. Dates going back 3 years. Total due, $150,000. She didn't have insurance. She had been paying out of pocket. My checks barely covered the interest on the debt. She had been starving herself to pay for the privilege of breathing for one more month, just to stay alive long enough to see me one last time. I sat down on the mattress. It smelled of her. Lavender and pain. I looked around the desolate room. This was her life. While I was drinking wine in Paris, she was shivering in the dark, coughing up blood, waiting for a phone call that never came. Something caught my eye under the bed frame. A wooden box. It was an old cigar box, battered and scratched. I pulled it out. It was heavy. My hands trembled as I touched the lid. I remembered this box. She used to keep her sewing kit in it. I opened it. There were no needles or thread inside. It was filled with paper. Hundreds of envelopes. Addressed to me. Mr. Julian Vance, Paris. Mr. Julian Vance, London. None of them had stamps. None had been mailed. And on top of the letters lay a small, black leather book. A diary. And a ticket. A yellow, faded pawnshop ticket from 8 years ago. The item description read, Steinway grand piano. Vintage 1968. I stared at the ticket. A Steinway? My mother never owned a Steinway. She cleaned floors. She couldn't play, could she? I picked up the black diary. I opened the first page. The handwriting was elegant, flowing, from a time before her hands were crippled. June 12, 1980. The professor says I am ready for the concerto. He says my hands were made for Rachmaninoff. I feel like I am flying when I play. I froze. My mother? Playing Rachmaninoff? I turned the page. August 1982. He is dead. My husband is dead. And I am pregnant. The debt collectors took the house today. They want the piano. I cannot sell it. It is my soul. I turned another page. A tear fell from my face onto the paper. December 1982. The baby is born. His name is Julian. He has long fingers. Musician's fingers. I sold the piano today. I needed the money for his formula and a roof. It felt like cutting off my own arms. But when I hold him, I don't mind. I will be his hands now. I will work until my hands bleed so that his never have to. I dropped the diary. The truth crashed into me like a freight train. She wasn't just a maid. She wasn't just a janitor. She was a virtuoso. She was a genius. She had given up her art, her passion, her very identity, for me. The talent I thought was mine? It wasn't. It was hers. It was genetic. It was a gift she passed down, watered with her sweat and protected by her silence. And I had mocked her hands. I had mocked the very tools that had built my pedestal. I looked at the pawn ticket. She had kept it. She had hoped, maybe, one day to get it back. Or maybe just to remember who she used to be. Mom, I wailed into the empty, cold room. Mom, please come back. I didn't know. I didn't know. But the room was silent. The silence of the grave. The silence of a son who waited too long to listen. The day of the funeral, the sky over Brooklyn was the color of a bruised plum. It rained. A cold, relentless drizzle that slicked the streets and made the world look as if it were weeping. The service was held in a small, drafty chapel near the cemetery. It was not Carnegie Hall. There were no velvet seats, no chandeliers, no critics with notebooks. There were only 6 people. Me. The priest. Mrs. Gable from upstairs. 2 women from the laundry service who remembered Martha's kindness. And the funeral director, who checked his watch every 5 minutes. I stood at the front, looking down into the open casket. They had done their best to make her look peaceful. They had applied rouge to her cheeks to hide the gray. They had dressed her in the blue silk gown, the one I had bought for her to wear to my triumph, the one she had worn when I shattered her heart. But they couldn't hide her hands. Her hands were folded over her chest. The knuckles were swollen knots of bone. The skin was scarred from years of chemical burns. For the first time in my life, I didn't look away. I looked at them. Really looked at them. I saw the map of my existence etched into her skin. That scar on her thumb? That was from the double shifts at the diner to pay for my first tuxedo. The twisted index finger? That was from wringing out thousands of sheets at the laundry to pay for my flight to Paris. The burn on her wrist? That was the price of my Steinway. These were not ugly hands. They were the holiest things I had ever seen. They were the wreckage left behind after a woman had torn herself apart to build a man. I reached out. My own hands, smooth, in shirt, pampered, shook violently. I touched her cold skin. "I'm sorry," I choked out, the words scraping against my raw throat. "I'm so sorry, Mama." I leaned down and kissed her hands. I kissed the knuckles. I kissed the scars. I bathed them in my tears, trying to wash away the bleach, trying to wash away the years of my ungratefulness. But tears cannot wash away the past. The priest cleared his throat. "Mr. Vance, would you like to say a few words?" I turned to the empty room. What could I say? I killed her. I stole her life. Words were useless. My mother didn't live in words. She lived in silence, and she lived in music. I looked at the corner of the chapel. There was a piano. It was a humble, brown upright, scarred with scratches, dust gathering on the lid. It looked exactly like the one in the community center where I had played my first note. I walked over to it. The bench creaked as I sat down. I lifted the lid. The keys were yellowed, like old teeth. I didn't play Liszt. I didn't play the intricate, thundering scales that made me famous. I closed my eyes and searched my memory for a sound from the very beginning. Before the fame. Before the shame. I remembered a melody. A simple, haunting tune she used to hum to me when the thunder was too loud, or when the fever was too high. She never told me what it was. Now I knew. It was the second movement of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. Adagio sostenuto. The piece she was born to play. I pressed the keys. The piano was out of tune, but it didn't matter. I played the melody. I played it slowly, tenderly. I let the notes hang in the air like smoke. I wasn't performing. I was talking to her. "Can you hear this, Mom? It's your song. It's your hands playing it, not mine. I'm just the instrument." For 5 minutes, the chapel was filled with a beauty that transcended death. Mrs. Gable was sobbing into a handkerchief. The funeral director stopped checking his watch. I poured everything I had into that wood and wire. My regret. My love. My grief. When I hit the final chord, a soft, resolving major triad, I let it ring until the sound completely faded into silence. I sat there, head bowed, listening to the echo. And in that silence, I felt it. A warmth on my shoulder. A phantom touch. A forgiveness I didn't deserve. The weeks following the funeral were dismantling. I canceled the tour. My manager screamed. He threatened lawsuits. He told me I was committing career suicide. "I don't care," I told him, and hung up. I didn't go back to Paris. I stayed in Brooklyn. I walked to the pawn shop on Fifth Avenue. It was a grim place, smelling of dust and broken dreams. I slammed the yellow ticket onto the counter. "I want it back," I said. The pawnbroker, a man with eyes like a lizard, looked at the ticket. He whistled. "8 years, pal, this ticket is expired." "Long gone." "Check the inventory," I said, sliding a wad of cash onto the glass. $10,000. "Check it." He checked. He went into the back room. I heard the sound of boxes moving. Then, the heavy scrape of wood on concrete. He wheeled it out. It was a 1968 Steinway Grand. It was covered in a tarp, dusty and neglected. But when he pulled the tarp off, the black lacquer still gleamed beneath the grime. I ran my hand over the curve of the lid. This was it. This was the piano she had sold her soul for. This was the piano she should have played on the stages of Europe. Instead, it had sat in a cage for 8 years, waiting. "I'll take it," I said. "Deliver it." "Where to?" "Penthouse in Manhattan." "No," I said, "to the basement. 42nd Street." I didn't sell the basement apartment. I bought the building. I evicted the rats. I fixed the roof. I installed proper lighting. But I kept the walls. I kept the layout. I turned the damp, dark prison of my childhood into a sanctuary. I set up the Steinway in the center of the main room, right where her mattress used to be. I placed the wooden cigar box on top of the piano. I framed the pawn ticket and hung it on the wall, next to my Pritzker Prize. One was a symbol of vanity, the other was a symbol of value. I knew which one mattered more. I didn't stop playing, but I stopped performing for applause. I started the Martha Vance Foundation. It wasn't a tax shelter. It was a mission. I scouted the city for kids like me, kids with dirt under their fingernails and music in their heads, kids whose parents were scrubbing floors to buy them a violin string. I paid for their lessons. I bought them instruments. But more importantly, I paid their parents' bills. I ensured that no mother would ever have to choose between her hands and her child's dreams again. 1 year later. It was late. The rain was falling against the basement windows. That familiar, rhythmic drumming that used to terrify me because it meant leaks. Now, it was just music. I sat at the Steinway. My hands were aging now. I could see the first hints of veins, the first stiffness in the morning. I welcomed it. It made me look like her. I opened the black diary to the last page. There was one entry I hadn't read until today. It was dated the day I left for Paris, 5 years ago. August 20th, 2015. He is gone. He didn't look back. It is okay. A bird does not look back at the nest when it learns to fly. If he looked back, he might see that the nest is falling apart, and he might stay. I don't want him to stay. Fly, my Julian. Fly high. The silence here is heavy, but the music in my head is loud. I am playing our concerto, and in my mind, you are turning the pages for me. I closed the book. I placed my hands on the keys. The room was dim, lit only by a single lamp. I began to play. I played a sonata I had written. It was called Martha. It was not a happy song. It was full of discord, heavy chords, and sharp, biting notes that sounded like coughing, like breaking glass. But underneath the pain, there was a melody. A simple, rising melody of pure, unadulterated love. As I played, I closed my eyes. I felt the vibration of the strings travel up my fingers, through my arms, and into my chest. And for a moment, I wasn't alone. I felt a presence beside me on the bench. I felt a pair of rough, swollen, beautiful hands cover mine. They weren't heavy anymore. They were light. They were guiding my fingers, correcting my posture, turning the page. The bleach smell was gone. There was only the scent of lavender, and peace. I finished the song. The final note hung in the air, suspended in the dust motes. I didn't bow. There was no one to bow to. I just whispered into the quiet room. "I'm listening, Mom. I'm finally listening."